Guten Abend.
Guten Abend.
I'm here with nRated. Last time we did an interview, we'll just start there, okay? Last time I did an interview with you, I was like, great, this guy's an analyst now, he doesn't even play. He'll be able to give me like the real scoop on what he thinks of players and stuff. At the time, fans wondered like, oh, well, since they brought Xhaka in to maybe sub for Snoopy, does that mean like nRated will maybe sub for Crepo? But it never happened, okay? You just stayed as an analyst. And it wasn't until after that team split up that it was announced like, okay, you're going to try and join a team again or something. Were you really thinking when you joined EG, maybe I'll get to play, maybe I could actually get subbed in? Was that ever even a possibility of becoming a permanent EG player?
The main idea was, first of all, I come there and help them out. In what way, I didn't really mind. I didn't come there to replace Crepo in any sense, and even I was in the room for quite a long time. Same for Xhaka. Like basically, what was planned by them at the start was to like swap around and do something with like Snoopy and Xhaka, with me and Crepo as well. So see how it works and try both of us out. But in the end, I was doing so much analyst work. I was sitting there from like day and night. I was basically not playing in that time and just trying to swap around and so on just before like regionals, which was a really big tournament for themselves. I decided for myself that I would not want to try either. So I just said, stay with Crepo, it's working fine, and we will make this work.
When you were in the team then and I asked you for like analysis of EG, it seemed like you had a pretty good idea on what problems they had, like what weaknesses. Like you told me that they had like no confidence in like level ones and stuff. They thought like, you know, we have to go late game like EG style, even though they always claimed that that wasn't the style they played. That's like what they did, okay. What would you say overall, your actual, now that it's over, the impact you had on the EG lineup was? Like how did you help them? What do you think the relationship was like?
As you said, like the confidence of them was rather mid and late, not early. So I tried to swap that focus from having this, okay, we pick for mid and late and we go for team fights, into, okay, how can we contest objectives and try to get control over certain points. For example, they did a lot more Drakes, which was statistically, like after I joined, they got more Drakes, more early Drakes, they had more first bloods, they generally didn't fall behind, they just stayed even or got ahead in early. And I just planned around that early a lot, which I could do as an analyst, saying, okay, they're gonna lane like this, these are the rotations you need to do early on to get like some success in the way you play with the champions you play. I planned on how they picked and so on. I did a lot of that work, and I think that just gave them confidence for the early that they just like used to get into mid, and mid is their strength already, so I just play into their hands.
Because since you did such a good job, okay, when you weren't playing in the lineup, of like analysing EG and telling me like strengths, but all things like maybe people wouldn't know about them. I thought a way to get into the rest of this topic was I want you to be the analyst again, but now you're going to be the analyst for me for Alliance.
Okay.
Because here's the thing, I asked you about Froggen, you know, this was the period when a lot of people initially were like, oh, maybe Froggen isn't as good now in Season 3, maybe with like the Assassins, he's not the Froggen we remember. But you told me like, I mean, I'm a Froggen fan, so it was like music to my ears. You were like, no, this guy's amazing, like his mechanics are incredible, like he knows every matchup and stuff. What's Froggen's problem at the moment?
I think it's more like the whole team. While EG had a really like team synergy, team bonding, they were like close together. Maybe they were not best friends, but they knew they could rely on each other's abilities. And in the new team Alliance, it's like they have new guys that just came in. They didn't really build up that team bonding, that team synergy in general. And I think it's a big deal. And early on, their players are individually very strong. You saw that in scrims, and they also hold a really high scrim record against basically any team still, after losing a lot of matches in LCS now. I think that's just because the way they play, they are affected by their nerves a lot. Like while they play, they just have like, they're afraid of fucking up basically. They go into a game and they say, okay, we should do this. But when it comes to that moment, they're like, okay, I have to jump in and sacrifice myself for the team to follow up. And they're not just yet on the point where they say, okay, my team will follow up no matter what. They're always on the point where they say, okay, if I go in, I just suicide anyway, so let's just keep it down. And they try to get away from that, but it's a hard process to just like build up that trust in themselves. Individually, they're strong. Their laning phases are strong. And overall, I think Froggen is just not shining yet because he didn't create the right environment around him. That's my thing. I think he's really like one of the top mid laners, and from what I've played and talked with him, he has like an insane knowledge, knows everything, and he's a really great individual player. He just doesn't have the team to like make him shine just yet. And I think like if we give Alliance some more weeks and some more practice, and they start like learning how to get past that early strong point that they have, and like make mid game or late game a strength of them, while team fights are more coordinated, they pick up targets more efficient, things like that. That can help them, and then they will improve. But at this point, they just basically need to build up a team, because right now it feels like they're a bit shaken apart. They're just like, some parts are doing there, some parts are doing that. And if there's an invade, it's not 3 men going for an objective, so it's not contestable. It's rather Shook jumping alone into blue buff at minute 7 because he knows it spawns. And it's just like, I take the risk anyways, I don't care, I'm just going to try to do this. And things like that, it's like individual plays, but overall, like in general, they don't know if they get some play done, how to get an advantage on other lanes and then play it out together and pressure. I think that's a big deal for them. As long as someone is strong enough to carry, they might win games, but they cannot just like get this one strong guy to snowball other lanes or just play out advantages that they have right now. That's a really big deal of them.
One of the speculations people made when they first saw Alliance doing badly, and I want to get your take on this because you actually saw how their team worked in terms of shot calling, was people, like, as a very simple explanation, they said, oh, well, I guess what must have happened then is, like, Crepo and Snoopy, they must have been like the shot callers, and they kind of like decided what they'd do as it went to the late game. And so, yeah, Alliance has like the mechanical players, they have Wicked, they have Froggen, and they have other mechanical players in the team, but like, where's the shot caller? That's like, because if you think about it, they always fall off once it gets to the team fighting part. Like, Froggen can have the best laning phase in the world, but they don't win the game. Is this too simplistic an answer? Is there a degree to which they have shot calling issues and that was the shot callers that left?
There's a big part of truth in that words. I think they were very vocal in the team in general. I mean, Yellow Pete was rather calm, and Wicked from top lane didn't really have much impact, so it had to be Froggen, Snoopy and Crepo doing something that they don't do now. I think right now it's like Snoopy and Crepo did a lot of decisions, either go for Drake or not, seeing the situation, judging it, and from their experience they could tell, okay, is it even possible or is it worth it? And I think they're lacking that a bit. They don't have like someone that has like a voice over others. They don't have like a certain order in the way they make calls. And their communication in general is pretty much not on the EG level yet, because those guys have played together for a long time and building up communication takes time. And it needs a lot of trust in the calls that are made. And I think Snoopy and Crepo were very vocal players, and I don't exactly know how it works now because I haven't like heard to their voice or anything while they play. What I've seen is games they've lost, they've all went tilt mode and didn't talk at all. So I think that's like a mood thing, and on top of that, they don't really have someone that feels responsible for making those calls.
In the off season, when it was announced like you'll try and be a player again, I thought like, oh, cool, like the whole Fnatic thing will be forgotten about. You'll just get like for sure an LCS team will want you. I remember like Monte Cristo telling me you were like the best Western support or whatever. So I thought if you have that type of reputation, even if what Fnatic said was true, okay, there's motivation issues, that won't be a problem now. But then when I heard all the rumors that were going on with all the teams behind the scenes, I won't say which teams, but there were different teams where there were people trying out for the support position. And every time I would hear that you were one of the names trying out. Then every time I saw you never were in the final lineup, you kept getting dropped or they picked someone else. And I started to think like, oh, is nRated just never going to get into LCS? What was going on for you at this period of time? Like, were your skills good enough? Like, were you yourself like disheartened when you weren't getting into any of these teams?
There are certain things that played into that. I think when I come into a team and someone tried to pick me up, it's always like, okay, that guy is a shot caller. So okay, they expect me, I come into the team and I prepare everything and I just say what to do. And that time I was like, I was having a hard time for myself getting my play on a level where I wanted it to be. So I had to focus on myself more than the team in general. So what I did was I played a lot for myself, but I didn't play like enough games just yet to be back on a level where I said I'm comfortable with the mechanical skills I had. And I think that was a big deal. And on the other hand, there are great supports that didn't have that break because I basically didn't play for 3 or 4 months almost. So I think that was a big deal that came into it. And I was not shot calling a lot when I start playing with the team. I need to build up that trust and I need people to like rely on my calls and do those calls, and they need to be precise and sharp. And right now I'm starting to get back into that shape where I do a lot of callings. The way I call is precise, on point, and I just need time to develop. And some teams were hesitant because they were not like, they didn't know if I could make it back to there, or they were just saying right now he's not in the best shape. And I had to play with 80 carries I wasn't playing before, so I had to build up synergy there. So if I had the process of playing with someone for a longer time, I would have probably convinced anyone. but I didn't really have like a time. I was always like playing with any team for like 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes I pulled out, sometimes they pulled out. But in the end, I found a team that I'm really comfortable with, and I'm really happy about that.
Because the other thing is, with the timing of how things happened outside of you joining SK, like they had the promotion tournament, they looked like they were going to go out, and then it looked like, oh, Nif was the MVP, he carried them, and then he leaves their team, everyone thinks, okay, SK is going to be way worse. Then when you join in that spot and you haven't played for all this time, people are going to think, okay, well at least he's not going to be as good as Nif, because Nif was on fire, you know, and Nif's going to be amazing in Alliance. And we've seen, like, Nif hasn't been very good in Alliance, and you've actually been doing very well in SK so far since you came back. Like, how were you able to replace Nif in that sense? Did you do it? Did you try to fit in with what you used to do with Candy Panda? Did you have a new approach? What did you think?
Well, first of all, I tried to get my game up with Candy Panda. Like, synergy is a thing that doesn't get lost that fast, but we had to definitely work on ourselves. And we are, like, personality-wise, we were good friends before, and we were talking a lot, and by that we just simply improve, and we knew that. And just in the team itself, I didn't try to replace Nuf. I was just a new support that went in there, and I was doing my thing in the way I wanted it to do. So it's like the things were working my way, and I was just trying to make it work for me, and somehow it just makes the whole team like play better together, have more synergy and so on. I just try to help everyone as much as I can while I get myself on a good shape. And let's go back to that Fnatic topic where we said like motivational issues and slump, just not playing enough. When I started to play in Fnatic, like pre-LCS, and when I went to the house, I got up the earliest and I went to bed the latest, and I was playing more than anyone in that time because I knew I had to get myself back into shape, and the only one that could do that was me. So I was trying to put that behind, and I put a whole another level of effort into all of this because I've learned my lesson from some parts and it would not happen again.
Because one of the strange things was that you actually were playing with Candy Panda before Reckless came in. And so that could have been your AD carry in Fnatic. Yeah. Was there really anything there to build on, or was it like you were just two new players when you joined now in SK?
No, I really knew how he wants to play the lane. I had a general idea of how his play style is and how I need to adapt to that. So I didn't go into the lane and said, okay, so how do you want to play this? Do you want to trade? Do you not want to trade? Do you want to play aggressive? I just like started to go aggressive, and I saw if he followed or not, and then I adjusted the level of aggressiveness that I put onto the lane. And I pretty much suicided many times just to see if he follows or not. And like slowly but surely we managed to build up a point where we both knew, okay, we're both on one line, we go in or we don't go in. And that's like how it's supposed to be. And I think we had a lot of background. Like we were playing Season 2, and we were playing in, like, as you said before, Yellow Star joined Fnatic, we were playing a lot, and we were building up on that, and it was a really big point.
When you say like you know how he wants to play, what's funny is Candy Panda is one of the most old school AD carries in all of Europe, still competitive. I think he even has like some stupid stat, like he had the first ever pentakill in competitive history or some bullshit that he told me one time. And so in theory, he's been around like around the top level for all this time, but he's never really had that much exposure, okay? So a lot of people, even in SK, they looked at Ocelot, they looked at Kevin, or, you know, there were all these other names to look at. How would you describe what Candy Panda, what is his style been for his whole career, and what does he need from a support?
He was always playing with Nif, basically his whole competitive career, and he was rather a passive support. So he has to do all the plays himself. He needed to have that step forward. And as long as an AD carry has that step forward, support is easy to follow up or just do his thing because you always have the backup. His style in general is very consistent. He never like changed a lot the way he played. He just adapted it to the meta and the champions he played. Like you will not just permanently trade with Vayne while you try to poke as much with Caitlyn, just as an example. Okay. I think that matters a lot in the way the AD carries play, and especially how Candy plays. But I think as long as he feels freedom and he feels like he's equal, he always wants to go for trades and test out the limits that you have.
There's actually a strange scenario. When the way I set it up there of how you were trying out for these other teams that needed a player, and then they didn't pick you, or the trial didn't continue and they went with someone else, okay. And so the strange thing is, with like Nif leaving SK, it looked like, oh, there was like one spot left in LCS, you grabbed it at the last minute, like, oh, I'm in LCS at least. But actually, I mean, this isn't going to be any surprise. It obviously wasn't Gambit, Fnatic or Roccat, who were the top teams in the league, so it was someone else, and based on where you are now, you're doing better than at least one of those teams, because you must be by how the table is. So actually, it's sort of turned out better for you potentially than if you joined those teams. How do you feel like, where is your career right now? Are you going to be in a position where people, like I said, Monte Cristo told me back in the summer last year, like you're the best European support, even above Edward, I think. So how close can you be to getting there again?
Well, right now it's like, I had this slump. I had this 4 months where my career basically went like down because I was doing analyst work, so my player career was not really active at all. And I think there, like from that on, I started to build it up again by playing more, by showing more interest, by trying out for those teams. I was playing pre-mates with all sorts of teams, and I was just trying around, seeing if I can find a team that fits me and that I fit in. And I think the decision going to SK was made way before it was official.
Oh, okay.
So we were talking months before, even when Alliance and EG, like that whole theme was coming up and I was trying out for them. And NIF was trying out at the same time. Everyone was clear about it. Like we were openly talking about it in between me and Candy and me and NIF. We were just openly talking about it and with no like bad feelings or anything. So we were just trying to kind of sort out how we're gonna do this, and in the end it worked out for everyone.
Because on that topic of like having all the options and then a lot of them not working out, I obviously won't name a name here, but let's just say like a little bird once told me a story that nRated, either this North American team wanted him or there was like a chance and then they turned it down. And so that, again, that was strange to me because I thought to myself like, oh, well in NA, there actually aren't that many superstar support players, so they probably could use a support player. And so when I heard all these problems going on with finding a team, I know from Counter-Strike when I used to follow that game, unfortunately, if a player behind the scenes gets a bad rep amongst other players, like either they say like, oh, he doesn't practice enough, or they say he's not good, then it's like other people almost like want to believe that immediately. Like they won't even give the person a chance. They just go to like, oh yeah, I heard he sucks, so no, let's not try him. Was there any concerns that this was going on, or did you ever feel like your stock had dropped with your peers?
No. Because I knew as long as I showed the effort and I would be playing like a lot of solo queue in a time, the reputation would drop by itself, because the reputation was I was not playing enough solo queue.
Right.
I was always there for pre-mates, so pre-mates was never like the factor that just made anything worse. It was the solo queue. So I felt like as long as I give it a try, I play solo queue, that whole thing would drop off my shoulders anyways. It's just that if I could do it or not, and if I could like step up my game in a way that I'm on the level with the other top supports in Europe. And I think I did that quite well coming to SK. I like prepared a lot beforehand and I prepared a lot while I was in SK. And I slowly but surely get out of that, and I feel like I'm improving every week to week, and we are improving as a team as well, which gives us all more confidence. And to that North American team, I don't want to say too much. Of course, there was an offer,
okay,
but I decided to turn it down because I just didn't want to move to NA. It was more like the distance than any team or possibility that I had there. I think it was just like the distance, and all my social relations here in Europe were too strong and too bonded that I wanted to make that step and move there.
Right. When I did an interview with Mithy from NIP, he told me he thinks at the moment in Europe, like nearly all the bot lanes are quite similar level. Mm-hmm. So even if like names like, okay, Edward and Genja and Nif, these are all star names that we're used to, they're always going to be the top, okay. There's a lot of new bot lanes in LCS this season. There's the Copenhagen Wolves one, there's their Super Hot Crew one, even the Rockat one, they didn't have that support until recently. What do you think of the newer supports in LCS? Like, what would you say about them, or which ones stand out, or how close are they to the names we remember? Like, we all remember Genja, Edward, on that.
I think giving someone a reputation is made by the community, not by the player itself. Like, someone has an impact on what they're doing because he was doing great on a certain champion, doing certain plays. He was doing something extraordinary that made him stand out. I think that everyone can basically do that. It's just to the point where you have the exposure to be able to do that. If you play standard support that you do right now, you have your 3 support champs that you have to play on a decent level, and once you do that, you can compete on a really high level because they are not the highest skill cap champions, but they're not the lowest. They're relatively easy to play good on, but they're really hard to master. Therefore, it's like you can do a lot with those, but the plays themselves needs to be like somehow shown in public so people can see it. Like, for example, Vander right now, he plays a really solid Thresh, better than his other champions, for example. So his Thresh gets a reputation, he's the best Thresh in Europe, so he gets more exposure. He's just generally like hyped up in that way. And I think that can happen to everyone. And I think in Europe right now, the bot lanes are standing quite solid, like all of them. They're not ones that are like permanently shaky and doing really bad. But there are some that are better and some that are worse, and I think that also depends on the daily shape or the weekly shape that they have, how much practice they put into it, how much mind thought, and overall the team. Like the junglers can make any lane shine, so if you get a lot of jungle presence, then the bot lane will of course look better if they get a lot of kills and they're able to snowball from that. I think that always depends on the environment, how a support can shine, and sooner or later every support can shine depending on the team.
This might sound like a strange setup to this question, okay, but when you used to be at your peak as a support, the most famous times in Fnatic, people will remember it was back when support was one of the hardest roles because you were like just carrying wards. That was like your job. No items, just like wards. That's all I've got, you know. And so in theory, it was very, very hard because you had to make a difference to your team just using stuff like vision or being not very tanky at all, but staying alive with your AD. So in theory, it's a very hard role to play. And so when something's very hard and you have to make a lot, like be very efficient, there's a lot of room though to actually show difference between yourself and the other players at the role. Well, even supports I hear now in Europe complain as though the role is too easy. Like everyone just start door and shield, and then, you know, no wards, just use the trinkets, and then you can't put many wards anyway, and you have to guess where he is, and it makes it sound like it's like all homogenized, like everyone's playing kind of the same, and it's kind of the same level. Is it harder to stand out? Is it harder for you to like, does this era suit your style of play as much as it did in the past?
Well, my general play style was a lot like Season 2, at least. I had more gold than the other support. I always managed to get ahead in gold. I managed to outplay and be stronger in the end, like in the long run. Early on, I was always kind of shaky in a way. And at a certain point, I just was outstanding because of my builds that I had, or I was doing something different from the ordinary that other people barely could handle. And I mastered certain champs that others just couldn't handle at all, like Blitzcrank or Syra, when they were like basically not played. And people started banning them because there was no answer at that time. So I think from the point where people had no gold to now, it's like right now you need less skill to play support. You still have the ability to shine, but there's like more room for others that are like having less abilities in the way they do it than back in the days. Like back in the days, you were punished for every single mistake. You were squishy, you could not do anything. As soon as someone went onto you, you just instantly died, which was shown like supports were dying all the time. The KDA was incredibly low. And now you see supports are basically on one level with others because they just build up tankiness so early. And killing a support with Door and Shield already is like nearly impossible early on. Like you need to put so much effort and such a long time into just getting him down that it's like really hard to die as a support, except if you outman, like if you have 3 versus 2 situation and you gank him or something like that. So I think like the skill level that you need to play support on a decent level right now is lower than it was before. But overall, I think it's still a very skillful role, and you need to have a lot of knowledge in order to help your team out, like building the right items at the right time, providing the vision. Those things haven't changed, but they were limited. Especially the vision is limited, and the amount of skill you have in your positioning is like you can miss position and you will not get as punished as you were before.
One of the things that really did tip off, like even though we were told in the season changes, like, oh, supports will be stronger, you could really see it in this last OGN season because there were so many names who've been support players for a long time who suddenly were winning like MVP award for that game or stuff. And if you think about supports now, there's like a huge list like Mata, Mafa, Madlife, Puman, like almost all the top teams have a star support now, whereas before, some of these people, you know, no one looked at Mata as much, they looked at Imp, or no one looked at some of these players, they were always looking at the AD. How much, like the AD obviously hasn't changed much. Has it got so it's like 2 lane partners like that instead of the AD up here and then the support down here? How does it now? Because I know AD's complain, like it's now you can't just kill the support if he comes in on you. Like what's the balance like there?
The AD itself has limited tools to do something in laning phase. I think their damage overall got nerfed. Like with the mastery changes, they got nerfed a lot. And you're just simply not as carrying as you were before in early levels. So I think the AD itself went like a bit down. While the support has more gold, starts a lot tankier. Support, like with Door and Shield, is really strong level 1. And all the harassment, or basically almost all of the harassment that goes on early in the lane, goes from the support. So in a lane, you really need to have someone that is aggressive or like dominant as a support. Otherwise you get pressured back by the enemy support and it's hard to punish that. Every time an AD goes for a last hit, you just give him 1 hit. After 3 or 4 last hits, you just gave him 3 or 4 hits and his HP bar is lower than yours, so you have like pressure on his lane. it's like a whole different theme that the lane is played right now. It was similar before, but it's even more drastic now.
Do you watch LCSNA much?
From time to time, not all matches. Like those times are basically times where I have some kind of freedom during a week, so I decide I'd rather play, or sometimes I watch some matches that are quite interesting, TSM Cloud9 for example.
So if I ask you about a couple of the star supports in NA, you could give me like an opinion?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because we don't often get to hear much about the NA ones from the European players because there's not that much cross-pollination. One that I thought would be interesting to ask you about is Bloodwater from XDG, because last season he started to get a lot of like props for his play, etc. What do you think of this player?
The Bloodwater itself impressed me last season. Like he was doing a lot for his team, a lot more than he seems to be doing now, but that has more to do that whole XDG is kind of struggling at this point. Like it's hard to shine as an individual player in a team that is just showing a weak environment for you. I think he was playing very good, but he changed the AD, so their synergy was like a bit slacking right now, and since Suna is jungle, like a lot of things have changed for them in their playstyle in general, and they have not quite been able to adapt that. I think they need more time to like settle up their lane presence itself, and I think Bloodwater himself is an individually strong player, but he seems to be not shining these days, but it has more to do with his team than by himself.
Okay, because another one that we didn't get that much talk about was Lemonation, because I mean, even though he's on the best team, there's other players that people look at high, or Meteos or something. What do you think of Lemonation? Because I mean, I see him and I say like, he has to be good because it's not like his AD carries a superstar, and they're not like they're losing the lane every time. So what do you think of him?
Lemonation has a good idea of what to do. I think he's a very smart player. I don't know about his mechanics. I haven't played versus him that much. I've seen some games with him in the last time where he was not like on his top, but overall he's a solid player. Like their bot lane rarely loses. They always go even, and that's the way they need it to be. I think the way he plays the champions is not outstanding, but he always does his job. And apart from that, I know that he does a lot of researches, and the way they ban on pick is like mostly reliant on him, the way he prepares it. So I think big props to him, and I think he holds the team together more than he does. Like as an individual player, he might be okay or like above average, but overall, I think he does so much for the team that he's like one that you could never replace in any sense.
How about Xpecial from TSM?
Xpecial is doing a lot better. I think the individual plays he did in the last games, or in general in the last season as well, I think he was doing consistently good. Like he never had like a big slump, or that you see from other players that sometimes play good, sometimes play bad. I think he overall played very solid in everything, and he had his peaks sometimes where he really like made the difference between him and the enemy team. Like he just gave them the win sometimes with some plays. Either it was Thresh Hook or anything like that. I think he's a really good player right now. He's probably the best support in NA for me.
Okay, do you have anyone you want to thank or say hello to at the end of the interview?
Everyone that supported me, especially after Fnatic, like that whole time, and while I was in EG and so on, I got so much positive response and feedback, and everyone was holding me up, and I'm just trying to do my best and perform and try to get better and better, and that's all I can do. And for now, I thank SK for picking me up. I thank all the fans that have been sticking to me, and of course everyone, my family and my friends that supported me throughout that whole time.
Danke.
Thank you.